Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Mock Man at YouTube with another Q&A session. Today I'm wearing the Specs Mod t-shirt. Been getting a heap of club t-shirts and modelling related shirts. That's pretty cool. Don't know if it'll be seen throughout the video. A week ago I asked for some questions. Now YouTube is doing some funny things. I think one or two questions might have been blocked, removed, whatever. If you believe your question was not answered, I do apologise. The platform can behave like that and there's not much I can do at this present moment. Relist your question in this video and I'll personally attend to it or do something to make up for it. Again, my sincerest apologies. We'll go straight into the questions. JXTR Gumpler 747, interesting name. Hey, me again. I'm having a bit of problem. I'm painting with enamels and I don't know exactly how thin the paint should be. I've tried looking online for tips, but to no avail. I'm currently hand painting my high grade Graz or whatever, a nice shade of red orange, but the current coat right now looks like it has stripes all over the primer, though some of the paint has been absorbed nicely. I'm wondering if I'm thinned it wrong because I've done it by coats. Also, a little question, my friend, I'll actually answer the first question. I had done a tutorial a while ago. I'm not too sure if this individual was referred to it or not in the last video. It was quite a long time ago. What I recommend with my enamel paint is you apply your primer. You thin the enamel 50-50 or thinner. You apply it in coats or layers with up-thin hours between coats. The first up-thin coats, because you're going so thin, is going to look transparent. It's going to look blotchy. It's going to have it's going to be just plain terrible. You'll see the primer through it. Some areas it's going to be okay, some areas it's going to be patchy. There might be stripes, there might be all sorts of things. The most important thing is you won't actually have brush streaks. It's just going to be blotchy. Once dried, you keep applying layer upon layer of paint. It could be 3, it could be much more, until you build a solid colour that you're happy with. It doesn't matter even if it goes up to 8, 9 layers. If you feel it's too thin and the build up is not good enough, make a slightly thicker mix. Whatever you do, you don't make it thick to the point where you paint and it actually leaves streaks. Now the fact that you're saying that there is lines, there could be brush streaks. So generally with enamel, it doesn't matter how you thin it, as long as it's thin as possible. You keep applying coats until you get that solid colour. So don't worry about if you've done it 3 or 4 times, it still looks terrible. Hand painting to a very high standard takes a lot of time and you'll have a wonderful finished kit. So it's probably dried and hard, it's probably sitting there looking ordinary. Keep providing layers until you've almost got that airbrushed solid look. So just keep at it. If you're still having some problems, take a photo of it, send it to me and I can give further advice and encouragement. Next bit of the question. Also, a little question my friend wanted to squeeze in, which is okay, is that it is alright to airbrush with enamel. If so, then what's the thinning ratio? I find it to be similar to lacquer. Again, with enamel, it dries very slowly, but it works very well when it's fluid. I mix 50-50. I'll put on a very fine coat, just misting it on. Because there's a lot of thinner on it and it's going to take a long time to dry, do not apply too much. It'll start to drip and pool in some areas. So just put a really fine coat and leave it for a while. Once it gets to a putty state, put on another coat. It's okay for the paint to sit in the airbrush with the lid closed for about half an hour to an hour. Yeah, the thinner the better. It's going to be a little tricky to atomize, so practice painting a few lines and just keep dusting coats until it builds up to be quite nice. The best thing about enamels is using turpentine. It cleans out of your airbrush quite nicely. Thank you for answering my questions in the past, and you're more than welcome to ask again in the future, even on behalf of friends. And I hope my question right now isn't too much of a hassle. Never a hassle. If I can't answer the question, I've got a network of a lot of friends from many countries, many disciplines of modelling. I will find the answer, even just out of my own interest. Bonus question. Is it normal that I see my dogs dancing the tango and cha-cha after I cement my pieces? Your dogs might be sensitive to the fumes, but if they're not leaving or showing signs of migraines or pain, then I don't think it's a bad thing. It seems quite amusing. Yeah, that is a joke question. Fair enough. Too easy. I hope that helped you out, and again, just really take your time with the hand painting, and it should come out as good as an airbrush finish. Next question, Guy T. Why does, when I paint with the paintbrush, it leaves some brush marks, and how to avoid this? Paint is not as thick as water. There is some thickness, there's build-up, there's solid elements to it that's sort of the consistency of putty. And if you've ever played with mud or putty, when you apply putty and you brush it, you have excess of paint on a brush, and when you're brushing it across the surface, it's flat where the brushes touch, but it builds up at the brush edges. And no matter if you have a lot of paint on it, which is sitting on top of the surface like a putty, and you keep moving it around, the edges of the brush is always going to leave those lines of build-up paint. Now, there is two ways around this. If you dry brush, that is having as minimal amount of paint as possible on the brush and barely scraping it across the surface, so there is no chance of build-up of deposits of paint on either side of the bristles. The disadvantage is for the first few layers, it's going to look a bit patchy, look a bit streaky, though after a few build-ups, it will look quite effective. This method is really good for hand painting metallics. Another thing you can do is, and this is my method, you thin down the paint 50-50 to a liquid consistency. You apply it across the model, and because it's more liquid than a putty solid state, when there's a build-up, it just disperses and flattens itself instead of staying there. So watch my video on hand painting with enamels and follow that, or when you paint, just have as minimal amount of paint on the brush, just barely scrape it across where it looks quite patchy, quite transparent, and then once that dries, enamel is a very, very slow drying paint. Just for it to dry takes many, many hours, 6, 8, 7 hours, and to harden takes literally days. So all you have to do is wait for it to harden, to dry. So you give it a few hours between coats, and that way it's sort of more of a hard putty state than a liquid movable state, and you're able to build up the paint without having the streaks overlapping each other and leaving all these weird lines. If you use the thinning method, even with a gloss finish, because when you have paint streaks it looks terrible when you're applying gloss, if you thin the paint enough and you build up enough layers, a hand painted kit can even look amazing with a gloss finish. It's just a case of patience. And a lot of the advice I gave to the previous question would relate to yours as well. If you have further questions, feel free to hit me up. Captain Cavi, thanks for the videos. You're more than welcome. One of the biggest problems I found getting back into my childhood hobby is the cost of airbrushing equipment and paints, thinners, finishes, etc. I found during the late 90s, early 2000s, airbrush compressor and airbrush was very expensive, though with having a full-time job and disposable income, money's available, but nowadays you can set up a decent airbrush and compressor for about $300. What I did find was, back in the day, paints and putties were a lot cheaper. They're a little more expensive now, though you will find once you buy a colour, or a few colours for every kit you buy, you don't use that whole paint up and it just sits up in a large collection. and eventually over time 1 or 2 paints do run out and you do restock it, but it's just a thing of every model kit you buy and build, you attach 3 kits or 3 paints. So if your model is about $30-$40, consider it to cost $50, because you're going to have to throw $10 of consumables at it. But yeah, that is a thing. Thinners, you can find cheaper, larger quantities of thinners instead of buying the hobby grade stuff. I don't want to waste money on a cheap kit that will fail, but I don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on an airbrush. Equally, I don't want to spend a fortune on Pacific paints and thinners. I know you have done videos on the subject before, but maybe just an up-to-date video would be helpful. I believe the industry has created a market for paints and finishes, weathering products, that is entirely unnecessary, and a lot of the YouTube modelling channels are basically sponsored by these paints airbrush companies to tell us what we must buy. For example, Iwata or Vallejo paints, and in reality there are much better products already available for much less money. Would you agree or disagree? I completely agree. I'd lie if I said I wasn't completely sponsored as a modeler. I'm connected with Gunpla Builders Australia and Hobbycomb Bandai, and they do, or through Bandai, I do get a few kickbacks, a few free models in promoting the hobby for my club. Though purely on my YouTube channel, I do not push any agendas. I do sometimes get gifts and products to show off, though I'm normally quite brutally honest. I do like playing with all sorts of pigments and the more expensive products, but you find when you're starting out and you're just starting out rebuying everything, just focus on the essential tools and products you need. And what I find is I do spend a bit of money on the hobby, and I do like to go to a hobby shop, you know, once a week and drop $5 or $10, and you find now you don't have all the paints, you don't have all the thinners, though once you start building up and acquiring, you got the whole collection of paint, a whole collection of thinners, a lot of the tools. Every now and then, once a week, once a fortnight, when you wander in a hobby shop, you just pick up that one weathering product that you're curious and you want to play around with. And some of them are good, some of them are not necessary. Sometimes there are cheaper and effective methods, sometimes there's not. My method uses a combination of what's cheap and what's available, and some of the premium stuff. It's just what you feel comfortable as a modeler. You watch as many tutorials and modelers out there. Some people only use cheap methods, some people use sponsored stuff, some people get a lot of money from, let's say, Vallejo and advertise the hell out of it. And even with some of these products, it works well with some modelers. It does not quite work out for others. So at the moment, when you buy your kit, you buy just one tool and one product, or a couple of products, a couple of paints, a primer, a finished product, and every time you buy a kit and you finish your kit, you just buy a little more and you slowly build up. A hobby is something that you don't need to gear up immediately. I do have a ton of stuff, but it's just a build up over many years. So after 10 or 15 years, which is how long I've been in the hobby, continuously since I've gotten back into it, it just started with a single toolbox and about 10 paints, and about once a week, once a fortnight, buying one paint. You'll find later on you'll have hundreds. But videos on cheaper alternatives, I probably should do a top-up video on that. I do absolutely agree. A lot of my airbrushing videos is focusing on the cheapest thinners you can get, the cheapest methods of maintenance. I generally use Mr. Hobby lacquers. They're $4 or $5 a pot of paint, but that one jar of paint, even if it's a base colour, will paint approximately 4 to 5 models. So it's just a build-up of equipment and consumables. So don't feel that you need to be bullied to buy a lot of stuff right now. Just take your time in acquiring, and whatever takes your fancy, what you might be interested in, and just watch other videos on weathering products and whatnot. The thing that I find with weathering products, diorama stock and whatnot, when you buy a thing of pigment, let's say, you know, road dirt or something, that will last you for the rest of your modelling career unless you accidentally spill it. The only thing that has a tendency of running out is paints, finishes and glues. That's it. Everything else you buy, that's going to last for almost forever. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree with your statements, and there's a little more to your question. I am fairly ignorant on this whole subject, but feel that really we are being sucked into a market created not for us, but to take our money far beyond what is necessary. Yeah, some of these products and manufacturers can be a bit heavy-handed. They can push your products, and it can be a lot of modelers that say that only X product is good, and if you use Y product it's rubbish and your models are rubbish. I reckon you should talk to modelers. If you get to go to model meetings are the best thing. If you can get into a model club or have a few friends that are into models and everyone does different things, you can bring in products and pigments and powders and share and experiment and play, or even at model shows, and just get recommendations from people. Only buy things if you're inclined and if you want that finish. You see a tutorial, you see a product demonstration, you like the result, you buy it. If you see it and it's not within the scope of your style or method of modelling, then don't get it. If you make, high gloss showroom Mercedes and cars and Ferraris, weathering pigments and chipping mediums and dull coats is just completely inappropriate to you. Though to someone that purely does World War II rusted out Soviet tanks, buying Alclad premium metallics is completely inappropriate to them. Someone that sort of dances in between many different disciplines and models will build up a larger collection of pigments. So even though sometimes marketing can be quite heavy, you only really need to buy what you feel that you want to use, you think is going to be fun to use, and you think it's going to benefit your hobby, your models, your style. Don't worry about what products are being forced down your throat. Only worry about what you acquire for you to experiment with, or for you that will enhance your modelling. And sometimes you'll see something, you'll buy it, you'll try it, it's a complete piece of crap or a waste of money, and it's unfortunate. But it builds up in your experience and your repertoire, and later on down the track you do encounter other modelers and you can swap. You go, I don't want this weathering pigment, you don't want that thing, let's swap, trade, share. But yeah, don't feel inclined that you need to buy everything immediately. Okay, I'm fairly ignorant in this whole subject. I feel that we're being sucked into a market created not for us, but to take our money far beyond what is necessary. I already read that. I think the whole washes and finishes is a perfect example of this. From my limited research, most of the rust and stain products are basically just slight adjustments of burnt cyan and umber oils, etc. Yeah, that is correct. Sometimes people like to sit there and they'll get cheap enamels and oils and they'll mix them and they'll try to get the perfect mix and they're happy. Some people just want to get the perfect product off the shelf that they can use straight out of the bottle and clean up perfectly. I'm actually a big fan of shop-bought inks. I found using the Tamiya ones a long time ago for panel lining, it never ran out, and I was able to thin it, and it just was very, very convenient. I never had to mix my own, which always had a slight sticky consistency, but I'm a big fan of a lot of these acrylic ones. On the other hand, if you enjoy mixing your own coloured of washes and bottling them in big bottles or custom mixing them every time, that's perfectly fine. But some of the really expensive pigment companies sometimes goes to the hassle of collecting rust samples and perfectly mixing it to a realistic colour for people that are trying to get for that large scale perfect accurate thing. And some people are going for the more gritty video game stylized fantasy Warhammer Gundam rusts, and they mix their own. Both are perfectly acceptable, and if you mix your own washes and someone says it's rubbish because they use the AK or Vallejo products, they shouldn't be doing that. That's very bad behaviour or attitude in the hobby, and they're modelers that you shouldn't exactly be associating or mixing with. But yeah, it's okay for some, it's not okay for others. I was very lucky to work at a Shepparton film studio for a good few years in the 90s. Shepparton, wonder if that's in Melbourne. and spent a lot. Oh no, Melbourne. What am I thinking? Don't worry, I'm a bit tired. It's in Australia. For a few years in the 90s and spent a lot of time in a model shop. I absolutely guarantee you they never ever bought any of the shelf weathering products. No, a lot of the old film studios, science fiction and theatre places, they need to make things in large quantities at a set specific time, and in the art and sculptural industry they mix a lot of these things. They don't buy it off the shelf, but they are professional modelers. Advice from them is sometimes appropriate. Going on your own path is also appropriate. I just feel a lot of modelling YouTube channels are a front to sell priced unnecessary products to us. A lot of them are actually out and just saying this is the AK Interactive YouTube channel, this is our product, this is the Tamir YouTube channel. A lot of YouTubers do suck up for sponsorship. I don't blame them. They get stuff, they get to show it off, and there's a lot their own personal opinion. What are your thoughts? Sort of been adding across. Again, I'm completely independent. I like using what I feel benefits my models, and I have a lot of fun, and different elements of models I have different methods of doing things. I've also shown that 5, 6, 7 years ago I've used a product and it's changed, it's not as good, and today I'm using a different product. But YouTube may not be the only good place to hang out for modelling content. To tell the truth, over the years I've actually been watching a lot less YouTube for modelling channels or modelling YouTube channels. I spend probably a lot more time on forums and social media, and when a friend or someone that I know is picking up a new product and they post and they show examples, that's where I've been getting a lot of my information on, just watching people's work in progresses on Facebook, forums, and anywhere that people post actual work in progresses. And I'll always stand by that. The best way to learn about modelling, doesn't matter if you're a beginner to a senior, tutorials are great, but people's work in progresses are the best, because you get to have an in-depth look at their personal method, their personal style. Even if they're sponsored, even though they have a professional bias, when you watch their work in progress, then you get to see what products they truly enjoy using. A good example is back in the day with the Warhammer miniatures, people who work for Games Workshop, in the White Dwarf and in the professional sphere, when they were marketing themselves in major outlets. It's Citadel this, Citadel that, from primer to paint finish. But when you can find their little blogs and little corners where they hang out and show off their personal models, you got to see that what primers they truly liked, what paints they truly liked. To cut the bullshit is always in the work in progress, because that's just where people are actually in it for the hobby and themselves, and not a commission or a commercial venture, and it's what they actually like to use. So spend a little more time looking at that. Thank you very much, Andy. I hope that answered quite a bit of your questions. I sit on the fence, not because I don't want to scare any sponsors away or not. I'm always open for sponsors, but at the same time I'm not exactly going to let someone come into my channel or my way of modelling and saying, you're using this product from now on, you must speak well about our product, and you must push our product no matter what. I'll accept the gift, I'll use it, and I'll say if it's good or not. If I say it's not, I'll probably never come again. Doesn't bother me at all. I don't get enough freebies or money to make to actually be a complete sellout. So I hope that answered some questions, but out of all honesty, I just like to play with what I like to play with, but a lot of the time the cheapest methods, such as using Q-tips, super glue, floor polish, and bulk thinner like methylated spirits or turpentine, is sometimes a better option to a $10, $20 tiny bottle. Getting to the next question, Lon242, which I believe is a regular and has a few questions. Hey Alan, thanks for another Q&A session. I'll start with a somewhat technical airbrush question. Have you ever had the tiny nozzle O-ring of an Iwata airbrush fail? I do not use Iwata. I'm going to be passing on advice that I've gained from my friends, and there might be some further investigation required. I've had an Iwata clone and an Iwata HPCS that developed this problem. The paint in the cup would bubble as the O-ring wouldn't seal the needle well anymore. Aside from replacing the entire nozzle until Iwata, which is quite expensive for a tiny ass part, there any DIY fixes for this? Any advice on preventing maintenance for this part? Do's, don'ts, etc. What I recommend is, if you have a little hunt around on eBay and other places, you can buy a large collection of O-rings, and you can, if the O-ring falls off or completely fails, you can test fit other O-rings. And with my Sparmax, when the rear O-ring failed, I would put a large quantity of petroleum jelly. Now, petroleum jelly does not work out too well for Iwatas, but if you just only grease up that O-ring and the nozzle, put that in your Iwata, flush it out with thinner, you can see if it still bubbles or not, as there's a chance that that heavy thick grease could block the hole that it's creating, and some thinner dirt and paint going through it will just build up a nice seal until you dismantle it and do a full clean out, or when your part arrives. What I also recommend for people who own very expensive airbrushes, I own a very expensive airbrush, have a cheaper airbrush accompanied where parts can be bought very easily, and maybe do some of the very basic back work with your cheaper airbrush, and save your Iwata for your top coats, your main painting, your shading. If that does not work, that's it. Try changing the O-ring only if it's absolutely necessary. If it's not that necessary, grease it up. If you do change the O-ring and you find a cheap alternative from a collection of airbrush O-rings or generic O-rings, and it's not a perfect fit and it still produces the bubble effect, you could also grease that up and use an aftermarket one. That's what to do. Just focus on the tip. Don't mess with the rest of it, because they are very temperamental. But since you are an Iwata user, you know it better than I do. So yeah, give that a go. Question 2. I remember you mentioning good alternatives to Iwata airbrushes in past video. What are some of your favourite low budget, good performing airbrushes? I reckon it's not so much the airbrush, it's how you maintain it and the parts you put in it. I'm the biggest fan of Sparmax. It's very versatile. I've been able to do some pretty fine work, and the latest Iwata Max-3 is pretty awesome. There's major upgrades to what Sparmax has been releasing the past 20-30 years. It's got Teflon washers. It's very versatile. It's very tough. It uses the same really cheap parts that you can order for the hseng and other cheap brand airbrushes that just go straight in. They're near indestructible, and a lot of the videos I do my airbrushing is around the DH103. The DH103 is the grandfather of the Max-3, so the parts are interswappable, but it's just got some O-ring problems. And when I mean O-ring problems, the O-ring problems aren't going to appear until about 5, 6, 7 years after very, very heavy use. And with the nozzle, I've been using non-O-ring washer nozzles, and that has just absolutely no impact or effect on the airbrushing or the cup whatsoever. I definitely recommend buying a Max-3 Sparmax and going out of your way to find that. If you can't find that, any 0.3mm Sparmax is pretty good. And if you can't find that, the hseng brand, this is a Chinese bootleg of the Sparmax. They're on eBay. They appear for anywhere between $8 to $12 to $20 of a double trigger top-fed airbrush. They, after being pulled apart and heavily lubricated, they work quite nice, and they're not bad at all, even though they're only about $20 and you're used to using something around the $300-400 level. The best thing about it is parts are $1 to $2 a piece. You could buy a bulk of them, and they can almost be found anywhere in eBay Asian markets. Compare the two and see what you think. Other ones is Delta. Delta is very similar to the DH103. They're 0.3 mil. They've got a funny internal mechanism that I don't like for maintenance purposes, but once you get over stripping it and putting it back together, that's not too bad. The Tamiya brand is just a rebadging of the Sparmax, except you're paying a lot more because it's imported from Japan and whatnot, so don't bother about that. And the Gunzi one is also very similar to the Delta one, except you pay a little more for that as well. So there's some information. If you're willing to splash out some cash, Sparmax all the way. 3. What is the easiest and cleanest way to fix a gunpla kit's pose in place? I don't normally... if I'm going to fix it in place, I'm going to fix it before the painting stage, and that's just normally super gluing the poly caps into one position and then putting up the holes to make it look like that there's mechanical or a rubber-like cover. So super glue and putty, but before the painting stage. After the painting stage, it gets a little harder. If you get a pipette attachment to a super glue tube, you might be able to squeeze just enough in there to just freeze up or clog up the poly cap from moving anymore. Thanks, mate. Here's to another good year of modelling. Thank you very much, Lon. Happy New Year and happy modelling for the year. I look forward to making more content and seeing anything that you produce. A pox strike. When doing any type of weathering, is it okay to do it on top of Pledge Future? And how many coats should I put on the kits so it doesn't damage the paint underneath? When I'm weathering, I normally do put Pledge. I'll put a coat or two of Pledge because one coat's generally a bit thin and patchy. 2 coats is just the right amount for some reason via an airbrush. That when I'll apply decals, I'll do washes, panel line washes, sludge washes, all the washing stuff. And when that's done, I'll put another very thin coat and then a couple of Tamiya matte coats. The acrylic matte about 50-50 or more thins. I did a video a while ago where I got one of these really big jars that's about 46 mil. That's just a 46 mil Tamiya acrylic thinner jar. I poured a whole 10 or whatever mil of the clear matte, filled the rest up with thinner, shake it, and it's the perfect consistency for airbrushing onto models. 2 coats of this, then I do all of the dry brushing, the pigment weathering, setting, all that sort of stuff, and just for some reason washes sit on top of gloss coats and decals, sits on top coats easy. Pigments and dry brushing sits on matte coats because a gloss coat is perfectly smooth. A matte coat is very bumpy and rough, and it can actually hold the pigments and sit there instead of just sliding off. Sorry mate, can't quite exactly pronounce your name. I don't want to embarrass anyone. Hi. I've just used Mr. Hobby GX Clear Red and it looks horrible. I want to strip the paint from the painted parts, so I would be grateful if you could help me. Secondly, if possible, will you make a video about Mr. Color GX brands? By the way, great videos, channel, I've just subscribed. Thank you very much for subscribing. I'm looking forward to having you around for a little while. I've actually just bought the GX, some GX colors in Japan in December, and I still got it sitting in a plastic bag on the other side of the room, so I haven't had the chance to use it yet or for a project. I'm not sure if you're hand painting it or if you're airbrushing. Hand painting clears is insanely hard on a large surface. I don't exactly have a suitable answer to do it really effectively. Though you can get interesting results, it's not perfect. Airbrushing wise, I would have just thinned it 50-50 or further. It might be synthetic, so it might need a lot more thinning, and just ever so slightly dust it on until I get the right build up. Since your question is a bit vague, get back to me if you're hand painting or airbrushing in this video in the comments, and I will help you out further. But yep, I've just got it myself. I've seen people use it. I've been told it's a fantastic product, and there will be a review sometime in the future, but that's going to take a little while, as there's a backlog of projects that I'm doing and videos that are half filmed, half edited. Glues Brothers. Will you be doing a tour of your work area and your model kit stash in the future? Great channel, keep up the good work. I could do one now. I'm not going to do a standalone video. The whole thing of show us your stash, show us your workstation is an old thing from YouTube a long time ago. I don't know if it's exactly popular anymore, but yeah, we'll do a quick walk. I have to be a bit careful of the camera because I'm not exactly wearing appropriate attire waist down. Generally, I'm in a largish studio. I share this space with a family member, and this is a open share space. I do some building and prepping here. I'm able to pack and put away everything here if it's being used for other projects. At the moment, I'm building a Superfumia and painting a high mock. I'm doing a lot of polishing to get a maximum gloss finish for a tutorial. The 3D printer lives there. The laptop is normally right next door. I'm looking for a home for my nail polishes and some hard drives from a failed computer. The back area is a bit unkept, I do apologise. Some other projects. This is the workstation. It's very messy because I've just finished the model and I'm packing up. The kits here is only about half of my stash. This is stuff that I bought from my first Japan trip. I stacked it up because it looks cool and it's a nice backdrop for my videos. I've got my half-scale models there. An airbrush here. I have a hose, and the hose runs out to the back door there to extract the fumes. I wear a mask as well. I've got my airbrushes, my compressor, grinding wheel, drill, and I've just got 1,000 weathering pigments and paints around here. I haven't used a drill for a while, as I've been using the router of late. I wouldn't use a drill in this dangerous situation. But yeah, all of this is going to be cleaned up very soon, and I'll be ready for my future models. Just a couple of trophies I won over many years. Most of them were intermediate, a little harder to win trophies in senior. And here's just a few selection of the models that I built very recently. The older ones have been put away. I collect the cards for every time I've ever entered the Gunpla Builders World Cup, all the way in 2010 when it used to be the Buckirk. And this is a collection of all of my 72nd military tanks. And this cabinet also has a lot of thinners, primers, parts, weathering products, big thing of decals, and all of the diorama supplies, scalpel knives, sandpapers, metals, resins, tools, all sorts of things. It's absolute organised chaos, and I run everything out of 2 toolboxes that has the main tools and products that I use on a regular basis. Sometimes I model at work, sometimes I model when I'm at relatives' places, and I just came back from a meeting. Everything is just kept in this supermarket bag, 2 toolboxes, a kit, probably some extra bits and pieces. And the last meeting I was working at a really old E2046 resin kit. So I hope that was satisfying. Alex, hi bro. I've pimped half of my kit with an airbrush and Mr. Surfacer Primer 1000, but the airbrush keeps running into problems. One of the big ones is after a short while it starts spitting bigger paint particles and the paint won't atomize properly. I mixed with a ratio 1:1 with Digger's lacquer thinner and using 0.3 needle. Don't know what's going on, but the paint I've done so far are just not very flat. I feel like that matte finish isn't how it's meant to be because it feels too rough. I don't know how that, why I'm asking. Thanks, mate. I've done a video a while ago on the Mr. Hobby Primer 500, and a lot of the advice in that video will be appropriate to your issue. I think you have a couple of problems. The first one being that because primer has a microfiller, it generally clogs your airbrush and has issues of flowing. The second problem is there might be moisture in your workplace or your water trap, so empty your water trap quite thoroughly and your tank. Just make sure there's no moisture in your airbrush line or compressor whatsoever. That generally sometimes creates a bit of a weird texture. Another thing is you might be airbrushing a little too far away from the model. You might want to airbrush a little closer and just very, very, very light dust-ons. And when you got large chunks of paint just flying off, what could happen is your needle might have a slight bend in it, and paint is collecting there, and once it builds up big enough, it just gets pushed and lands on your model. It could also be collecting in the crown. Just for the meantime, what you want to do is spray a small amount, check your crown. If there's a build-up of paint, pull the needle back and just clean out with a swab or tissue, making sure that you don't damage the needle whatsoever. And just see how you go with that bit of advice. If that is not working out and you still got one or two problems, I recommend looking up my video honing your airbrush skills. It is either from video 9 to 11, could be 10. It's just stated an overview and back to basics, one of those two videos. It just shows you everything from stripping down your airbrush and doing a perfect maintenance job so that it is perfectly available and free to airbrush your primer, as well as my video on airbrushing Mr. 500. Same advice can go, and following that step by step with a maintenance video will have you airbrushing absolutely perfectly. I used to have the same problems. Once I went into a regime of very regular maintaining my airbrush and of a very consistent method of loading primers into my 0.3 airbrush, I've never had problems ever since, and it just goes down to a experience discipline thing. Once you know the correct way of maintaining your airbrush and the correct way of loading primer into your airbrush, you'll never have a problem again. So look up those two videos, give it a try. It's probably going to succeed and fail a couple of times until you got that right balance, and you'll be off to go. But they're the two videos to check out. If you need some further advice, hit me up with a message, or if you don't even want to look for those videos, hit me up with a message in this video, and I'll actually post the link to the two videos that I am talking about. Next question. Tim, very good mate, long time supporter. Hi Alan, hope this question reaches you in time for your Q&A. Generally when I start filming the Q&A I put the video in private, so when it's up it's always good to accept questions. I'm still using Alclad primer and it works for me. There is however one slight problem which may contribute to the primer, but I'm not sure of it, so I would like to get your opinion on the matter. I do have problems with the Alclad primer. I'm phasing it out and not using it anymore, but we'll hear you out. Since a few models I'm using Mr. Hobby lacquer based paints. The Mr. Colour range, last time I made a master grade and sealed off the paint with lacquer based gloss clear. In some cases I needed to use a fine tipped Gundam marker to trace along raised edges. Normally I would do this with an enamel wash, but this gives me more defined lines. In any case, there is a fine tip on these markers, only a few millimeters long. and that there is a metal shaft. If I as much as a feather touch the edge on the painted surface, the paint comes off and leaves the primer visible. Normally this is no problem to just use a fine paintbrush to fix up, except if it's pre-shaded. In my book, lacquer based paints are the strongest of all paints. I never had any problems with enamel nor acrylic. Do you think it's a matter of the paint not adhering to the primer? And if so, would you recommend another primer for Mr. Colour? Was thinking about getting some Mr. Hobby primer aerosol cans and decanting them, but they are not sold in hobby shops over here and rather expensive to get via eBay as such. So an alternative would be great. That's a good question. I've got some answers for that. When I mean that I have problems with the Alclad primer, I just have problems with the application. I just have a tendency of clumping up and spitting chunks on my work. I've sort of somewhat sorted that out, but don't really like how it's thick. In the way that it adheres to a surface, it's perfectly fine. It has no problems sandwiching paint onto a bare plastic surface. Your primer does not seem to be a problem. Mr. Hobby Paints is the correct use of paints. Gundam markers are also made by Goons or Mr. Hobby, and the problem with the Gundam markers is that they're a mixture of lacquer paint and lacquer thinner. So when you're applying them to a surface, sometimes they can have more thinner than paint mixed into the tip. This paint seeps into the paint and it just lifts the paint straight off the primer. So the problem is the marker and not the paint or the primer. The markers have never been designed to be used on top of painted surfaces. They've only been used to paint on plastic surfaces. They're actually ideal having a lot of lacquer paint and thinner. It just eats straight into the plastic and stays there permanently. Once it starts applying onto paint, I found it with acrylics that it sort of leaves a residue onto the tip and it just starts to fail. If applied on lacquer surfaces, it just reacts really badly with the paint. What I do recommend, and I've got the perfect product, I've also been highlighting edges ever so slightly with something. If you apply a matte finish onto your model, these Mr. Hobby weathering pencils are absolutely fantastic. There's a black colour, there's some rusts and some other browns. Ever so lightly, with the very tip or edge of the black line, you're able to feather it across edges. Leaves a very nice black line. I'm not sure if I'm working on a video on this product or not. I think I should be. This stuff is just really good. They're meant to be solid pastels, and that you're able to apply to a surface rub and just have general dust or highlighted lines or whatnot. So it's a waxy pastel. This applies very nicely on matte surfaces. So if you're doing a matte if you're doing a gloss finish, just put a really fine coat of semi-gloss. Mark it up with this stuff and then put another gloss on top. It doesn't sit permanently, it needs to be sealed, but I think this would be an alternative product over markers, because Gundam markers are just not really appropriate to sit on top of primers or paints. They're just far too irregular. They sometimes lift the paint, they sometimes not, they sometimes work, they sometimes fail. All I know, they're just really ideal to be used on bare plastic and not painted surfaces. Back to the question. Sorry for giving my life story once again. No, the level of detail was really good, so we're able to discuss it without going backwards and forwards. That's a great amount of detail for a question. Thanks for taking your time to keep this helpful and informative session of the channel alive. Not a problem, I'll keep doing it as long as there's interest, and I always thank people leaving really good questions or even bits of advice. If people just want to tell a story of applying something and using something without even an added question or just an opinion. But yeah, thank you very much, Tim. That was an excellent question, and I hope that new product works out. If not, maybe looking at other forms of markers that do not have a lacquer base, so probably like a Copic marker or a felt tip pen, or that pastel, maybe a graphite pencil that's really soft, so you know where you got the DH or 2H. If you buy a, let's say, a 6B or something like really super soft, that might leave a really nice line, or a 4B. We're getting into some of the Facebook stuff. This was sent in via email. Alan Chan, please no real name for these two questions from Not a Faggot. Apology for his name. Question 1, my friend is making a suggestive model out of an anime figure. It has bits that might be considered rude. How do you suggest he makes it able to be displayed in public competitions? Interestingly enough, I remember the first 2 times I went to Japan, I was going around Akihabara, Denden Town. They had a couple of pornographic or nude figures, statues, models on display. Obviously the genitals and the nipples needed to be covered. And what they used was they would get the 4 or 6 mil smear tape, and after it's been painted and clear coated, they just put a strip of this yellow tape across the nipples, across the genitals, and that was just a classic way in Japan how they handle in public space these types of models. So if you want to be very similar to otaku Akihabara culture style covering up, that could work. If not, maybe you could make up some sort of blue tack, coloured blue tack, and put them on those surfaces. You could make a black lace and just tie it around the bust and the genitals. There's a few creative ways you can go around it that would be very tasteful, and at the same time would display very nicely in a display or a competition. I'm happy to talk it further with you in person, but that's just some advice that's interesting to put out in this video. Question 2, my friend is building a super Fumina, but don't think he has asked her permission. I think he has a crush on Fumina too. What should I do? I reckon that if you're building a model, and if it's not too offensive, go ahead. Probably be disqualified from the Gunpla Builders World Cup because you need consent when making copyright goods, or goods based off actual people or personal information. Competitions are a no-no. Super Fumina is already a kit. I am not Samajin Kawaguchi. I'm not going to disqualify you, but I think you understand that this is a meme-based question, and glad that you are bemused with my answer. Rantea says, shout out to #GuntHunters. Next question, Facebook, Anonymous. I have a question. What is a good homemade acrylic thinner for airbrushing? Now this question was posted very late November after I did my last Q&A, so it's a long time until now. I apologise for the length of time to answer this. What is a good homemade acrylic thinner for airbrushing? I use Tamiya semi-gloss mixed with water and airbrush cleaner, and it still clogs even after I clean it. I would rather not buy the expensive Tamiya acrylic thinner, and I want to see what my options are. That's not a very good mix. You're using a bit of a paint, so it's paint and it's got hardening qualities to it. Airbrush cleaner is lacquer, and lacquer in some circumstances can and can't be used with acrylic. With water, water does not react well with lacquer, and there's a paint in it as well. A very bad mix. I can't call that thinner. What I can recommend for cleaning is methylated spirits. You can buy a big litre bottle for about $2 to $5 at supermarkets, hardware stores, anywhere. So there you go. It's not bad for thinning acrylics, but generally it's quite dry and evaporates quite quickly, so it can sometimes leave a texture. If you want a superior thinner and spend a little extra money, I recommend isopropic alcohol of a high percent, so 80, 90 to 100%. These in the United States can be found in hardware stores as well as chemists. In Australia, they generally just found in hardware stores. So isopropic, you can buy them in really big containers, but this is just an example of what it looks like. This is in a spray bottle for cleaning glasses and whatnot. Generally they're used as a cleaning solvent. All Tamir is isopropic alcohol that's an odorless variety. Majority of them you find do have a smell to it. It's just to prevent people drinking it or something. So they're your options. I would steer clear from Airbrush cleaner as a solvent, and I would steer clear of thinning down paint and water. Tamir and Goons is a alcohol-based resin paint, and even though they are soluble in water, they're not good at thinning with water whatsoever because they're not a water-based paint. Alcohol is most ideal for thinning them, and the two best alcohols is methylated spirits and again the isopropic alcohol. Next question. Hello sir, good day to you. I have some modelling questions. I'm currently painting my high grade 1144 Gundam model and I'm using a third party acrylic paint on it. My questions are: 1. Should I panel line first or top coat first? On bare plastic, you panel line first. When you're with a Gundam marker, panel line just bare plastic. When you're painting, your best chance for a panel line to work is on a gloss surface. I recommend I recommend you should use washes and inks. But if you are doing any sort of form of panel lining, a gloss coat always first over a painted surface, and then you seal it with another clear. So clear gloss, should I panel line first or top coat first? Top coat first, panel line, top coat again. 2. If top coat first, what kind of top coat brand should I use that will not make a glossy look? For panel lines to work effectively, you want it to be glossy. So you just apply a really thin amount of acrylic gloss. So you dust it on really fine with an airbrush, or you hand paint it really thin. You do your panel line, and then you apply a few layers of clear matte, or to me clear matte. Is it okay to top coat stickers that's on a model? Yes, it is always okay to top coat stickers. Just don't touch the stickers for a long time because they generally sit there and they take a while to conform, harden and dry. Any recommendations on how you hand paint a white acrylic paint on a model after you prime on? I use Vallejo primer, grey colour. Painting white, the best course to do that is apply your base coat of silver and then a few coats of white over that, either dry brushing or heavy 50-50 ratio mix, and you just build up over time so it doesn't streak or anything. Silver reflects light where black and greys absorb light. White is quite transparent, and if white's going to be transparent on the surface, it's best be silver because the light will hit the silver, reflect back, and the white will just look absolutely brighter. I hope those answer your questions, but since you're hand painting, when you're panel lining, yeah, just hand paint acrylic gloss, just heavily thin down, wait for many hours to dry, panel line, apply Tamir clear matte, and let that dry, and then do anything else. But yeah, that is the answer to your question. And that concludes the session. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time, I have not gotten any requests for shoutouts. This was a very good session. I had a lot of fun with this one. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, catch you guys later. There's a few things on the agenda. I have a lot more Japan videos to post up, about another 2. Things are back into production. I'm going to probably do some more 3D printing content fairly soon. I'm also aware that I've reached 4,000 subscribers. Now, tradition states that every time I get 1,000 subscribers, I do some sort of form of competition. Since I'm in some sort of disarray of just resetting and resettling in from a holiday in the new year, I'm going to give it a month Also, until I'm completely settled, and I've probably got about more than 1,100 subscribers, so I'm not embarrassed from a large influx of people leaving, there will be some sort of form of competition fairly soonish with a prize. I need to locate or figure out some sort of prize. So that's everything on the agenda. Thank you very much for watching. As always, until next time, and next month we will do another session. Catch you guys later.